Starting. Hey guys, Nugi here with today's video on physical defense. We're going to talk about armor, we're going to talk about endurance charges, enfeeble. We're going to talk about all the different things you can do to defend yourself against physical attacks and spells. So bring your paper and your pen and let's get started. So first off, what I want to start with is armor. It's the essential defense for most builds against any kind of physical attack. The way it works is this. We have our formula right here with armor rating, how it works. So you had the damage reduction, or the damage reduction factor is equal to armor divided by armor plus 12 times the damage. So what this ends up meaning is that for every point of armor you have, you can block up to a total amount of 1, and the more damage you take, the closer to 1 per 12 you get. The less damage you take, the further from the optimal amount of damage taken per point of armor you get. So, for instance, if you want to block 50% of the damage, you would need 12 times the amount of armor. So if you want to block 50% of 1,000 damage, you would need 12,000 armor. So to explain it in some numbers, I took 5,000 damage. How is that going to affect 5,000 armor, 20,000 armor, and 60,000 armor? And why does that matter? Well, first off, if you take 5,000 damage, you have 5,000 armor, you mitigate 7% of the damage. That's 350 out of the total 5,000. That's a very little portion. If you had 20,000, you would mitigate 25%. If you have 60,000, that's times the 12, you mitigate the 50%. As you can see here, to mitigate the last 25% from the 20,000 to the 60,000 armor versus the 5,000 hit, you'd have to triple your armor. The thing about PoE is that there are some values that are easy to get, and then it gets progressively harder. Getting 20,000 armor is not impossible. If you get good armor gear, you could get iron reflexes, you can go through determination and grace and all that, you can maybe pop 1 granite, all that. 20,000 is pretty obtainable. But for anyone who's played late game, 60,000 armor can be quite difficult to get. So instead of trying to get the last 40,000 armor, what you could do is you could use endurance charges. So what that does is endurance charges gives you a flat percentage for every single endurance charge you have. They give you 4% for every single endurance charge, and let's say you got 6 of them, either 2 from the 3 and then 1 from the last Merciless quest, or 1 from gear and 2 from the 3, or 1 from 1, or whatever. Let's say you got 6 of them. That's pretty doable. It doesn't require too much. That will give you 24% damage reduction. So if you're trying to get that last 25, like let's say you want to mitigate like half versus a big attack, and even if it gets bigger, it's going to be even harder to get that armor. You might consider going endurance charges because it might be just way easier to get. At least the 3, if you're fighting against a monster that will hit you very, very hard, using the 3 endurance charges you always have available to you is very, very, very good. Also, there's another thing you could do. You could use enfeeble. What enfeeble does, it lowers the total amount of damage done by 25% from the first level, and then goes up. If you remove 25% of the damage and then you take only 75%, what that does is that it makes the hit smaller. When you make the hit smaller, the armor matters more. The armor gets more efficient. Like the proportion of the damage you're going to mitigate percentage-wise is going to be larger. So that's a good thing, especially versus these big hits. So there's the other side of the spectrum, the smaller hits. So at the smaller region, I did the same amounts of armor, but versus a 500 damage hit. Say you take 500 damage with 5,000 armor. You take 45% of the damage, which is 275. That's pretty good. Like at the smaller amounts, having some armor is actually pretty good. because these are smaller, like it's easier to like out regen them. You get hit a lot of times in a row. They're not as spiky, so for a lot of the cases you don't really need that much armor. But say you want to safeguard yourself against these small hits as well. What would 20,000 armor do? Well, that would give you 75% damage reduction. That's 125-ish damage you would take. So a quarter. That is around 150. That would be around 150 damage. That extra damage you would mitigate a flat amount. 150 for that quadrupling of the armor. Let's then go 3 times up to the 60,000. You would mitigate 90%. It's actually over 90% if you look at it, but you can't, damage reduction is capped at 90%, so it would just go out flat 90%. At that point, endurance charges don't matter either. You could say that 3 endurance charges plus 20,000 armor would also suffice, and that would halve that damage by another 75. So you go 150 from 5 to 20 and another 75 from 20 to 60. But 75 flat damage reduction for 40,000 armor, that seems a little bit not very good, right? So what you can do is you can get Arctic armor. What Arctic armor does, it reduces a flat amount. Way! At level 20 it reduces it by 189. Which is more than going from 5,000 to 20,000 armor. And as the hits become smaller, this becomes even more efficient. At level 26, it's 319. This is more than going from 5,000 to 60,000 armor. It's substantially more than going from that. So as you can see, if you could manage to get in that Arctic armor, that would be really nice. And where this matters the most is probably versus your own reflect. Because your own reflects, especially like right now in the game at least, a lot of people build around hitting very fast, and the reflect comes in like a stream of damage to you, and you hit a lot of monsters for a lot of small hits, so Arctic armor becomes really good against reflect. If you're fighting a very big fat boss with like a lot of damage per hit, you want to get that endurance charge, the enfeeble, on top of a good amount of armor. So as you can see, the lower end of the spectrum really gets helped by Arctic armor, the high end by the enfeeble and endurance charge. That's really where the money is at. And then we have armor in the middle, which is like a trick of the trade. It works very well in the 20,000 region. I think it's really good in that region because you don't see many hits be above 5,000 or be and it's also very good at the lower end. So something to consider there. So yeah, I hope you guys learned something again today about the physical damage. You will know yourself where you need to work the most. Is it versus your own reflect? Is it versus like big hits? Is it versus a lot of smaller hits from titty bitches? Is it from spells, the evangelists that hit you multiple times? Are you very stationary? What kind of things affect you the most? If you can always dodge the big hits, then getting all that super high top tier armor might not be that hard, but or if you're taking a lot of small damage all the time, if that's what's really bugging you, well, then you also know what to do. Arctic armor does have other things to it, and so does endurance charges. Endurance charges give you resist as well. Arctic armor gives you slow and also some fire resist, a flat fire reduction. So there are some other things to consider there, but they also have their cost to them. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time.